On this episode of Made in America, I'm with Severine Zygmont of Oxford Performance Materials, and we cover some really interesting stuff, including the importance of creating barriers of entry for your competition, as well as the importance of curiosity in business. Don't go anywhere. Welcome to the Made in America podcast. I'm here with Severine Zygmont of Oxford Performance Materials. We're known each other for quite some time. We've worked together. We're on the Connecticut Technology Council board together. She's a tremendous leader in manufacturing, and I'm really happy to have you on today.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm very happy to be here and get to tell you a little more about what I do.
That's awesome. Well, it's the Made in America podcast. So we always start off with, what do you make and why do you make it?
So what we make, we actually do 3D printing of devices, medical devices, mainly. Actually, I brought a few over here today because I think it's always good to be able to see it.
That's right.
So we, at the core, we are a materials company, and we worked with polymer. One of the polymer, I'm not going to go to a chemistry class, but it's polyethylketonketone, PEKK. So everything we do here.
PEKK.
PEKK, correct.
Not to be confused with PEKK, which we'll talk about later.
Yeah, we'll talk about it later.
Yep.
No, it's Peck. I do have an accent, and it's not French for peak. But what's pretty cool is about now 8 years ago, we bought our first 3D printer.
Sure.
And we started getting into the manufacturing actually devices and medical devices right here in South Windsor in Connecticut.
Yep.
So not only it's made in America, it's actually made in Connecticut.
That's right.
And what we started to do is actually 3D printing patient-specific cranial and facial implant for cranial and facial reconstruction.
Right.
So we would work with the surgeon, we'll get the CAT scan, the DICOM file. I have a team of designers that actually know the anatomy and are able to actually design basically a part that matches the missing bone.
So a custom implant. So I crack my head open. I need a new piece of my skull. I can send a scan. You guys will look at that scan, design it, and then reprint a perfect match to go right back.
Yeah,
in
you
my
might
head.
want to talk to a surgeon first.
That's right. Don't do that. Don't try this at home. Fair enough.
Yes.
So that's awesome about what you make, and maybe talk a little bit about why you make it. What got you kind of into 3D printing and into this kind of field itself?
So I started as a chemical engineer. So I always kind of like that technical background. With polymer, it made sense. I was also always wanting to get into business as well. So, okay. So I think part of, why what I do today and how I end up here is kind of that mix of a technical background, but really kind of a neck for business, for creating something, not just
sitting in a lab and playing with
exactly.
Different
That's
things.
I like the interaction with also the people, some of our distributors, the surgeons. So I think that was kind of really a good fit for the type of things I like to do. And today, when you fast forward, to where we are, I've done it for 20 years. 3D printing 10, but 20
right.
years.
20 years overall.
But what's exciting in a business like that, you're able to make a living.
Yeah.
You're able to create, but you're also able to make a difference in someone's life.
Right.
I really believe that our technology is one of the best technology for this type of indication.
Okay.
Because traditional manufacturing, if you don't think of 3D printing, you would have to have a big block of some type of polymer or other materials, and you have to cut it. It takes some time. It's very inefficient, and you really are limited in the shape and size you can do.
Right.
And we've done everything from a very small, our orbital reconstruction,
Yep.
but there's a lot of very complex curvatures that are very hard to machine over.
So
block.
the orbital, was that for like an eye socket?
Yes, eye socket, yes.
And you're thinking that an eye socket kind of from a build-up perspective, using the 3D printing to create a replacement eye socket, is something that couldn't really be done in the traditional kind of block removal technology.
Yes, it would be very difficult, the tool, to access some of the type of angle and and geometries. It also would be very expensive for such a small part. But the other thing too, we've done also very large cranial reconstruction. We literally replace the entire dome of a skull.
Oh wow!
And if you had to do it out of a big block and machine it, it would be like cost prohibitive. It would not make any sense.
So let's take a little step back, right? So
Yes.
this sounds a little bit like George Jetson of the future, right? Like I give you a picture of my brain, and next thing you know, bing, bang, boom, you know, we've got some brains. So I mean, it's pretty exciting. You know, I think this has been talked about for a long time of what 3D printing can be, and just kind of maybe go through with us, like, you know, what is this technology all about? How does it work? You know. Without getting in necessarily to a chemistry lesson, what's a polymer? How is it different than metal? Like,
Yeah.
you know, is this real or are you making this up? You know, the interesting
Yeah.
questions like that.
So first of all, this is real. It's right here. This is actually the exact same implant that has been implanted.
Right.
So we just made a duplicate in case we needed to. So
For those of you listening and not watching, I don't
Yes,
even know what to say
please.
this looks like, but it's sort of like, I don't know, maybe
piece
like
of skull.
yeah, piece of someone's head, right, with some holes in it, which is really interesting and very much unique.
yeah, I forget that some people may just be listening.
That's right.
So what
And
it's
by the way, just really other thing is this kind of shows this piece inserted into this. Does this guy have a name? This fake head?
I call it Oscar.
Oscar? Oh, okay, there you go. So Oscar here is showing us what the implant looks like, kind of if it was put in. So if this piece was damaged in an accident or for some reason had to be removed, we can then print exactly what goes here. Does it really get attached with just these kind of three outer pieces?
Yeah, you just get very little titanium, like plates and screws, very tiny. You know, for people who can see it, they're just like a few millimeters.
Yeah, tiny. It's
very
only
tiny.
attached in three little spaces. Yep.
Because at the end of the day, you know, you don't really want a lot of metal in your body
Yep.
with any type of like surgical procedure, because there's issue also with imaging after artifact, and sometimes, especially like post-surgery, you know, post-surgery, if you want to do any type of diagnosis and things like that, metal can be a problem. So
Sure.
one of the advantages of a polymer
Yep.
is actually that you don't have the same issue. It says radiolucent or radiotransparent, so
Right.
you don't have any type of artifact if you had to do an MRI or anything after.
So if I
the
take
fact.
an MRI with a non-metal implant, I can actually see through it and all that.
Yes.
Versus put a metal plate in my head, you go and try and scan my head, and all you're seeing is a metal plate reflected.
That, and on top of it, and more of it, it creates artifact or, you know, in the surrounding tissue or surrounding imaging. So if you want to look at things on a, you know, not only just on the other side, but around it, you may actually miss some of it.
Okay.
So, which is why about 20 years ago, actually, polymers started to replace metal in medical application, especially in spine.
Right.
And for those type of reasons. So one of the other application we have is actually in the spine. We 3D print some spacer that, you know, if you had like a fusion surgery, for example, like any disc to a point where you have to remove the disc, you know,
Sure.
traditional, I would say surgery with a fusion surgery, when you cannot basically fuse the two vertebrae.
Right. So
So you
take
put-
the disc out,
just
fuse
take-
two vertebrae together.
Okay,
Yeah.
so you put a spacer in it. You pack it with bone graft to help fuse, you know, really
Yep.
the bone grow in between the vertebrae. So some of the old technology with titanium, for example, you couldn't see if actually the fusion was happening, because you had a big like spacer, like it's basically a big ring,
Yep.
big box in between. So you had no idea to diagnose if actually even the surgery worked. So about 20 years ago, another material like PEKK
Right.
came into play, replaced it. On one end, great, now it's radiotransparent, radiolucent, you can see through. And the other thing is there was a lot of like issue with metal in the way it would actually re-damage the vertebrae, the surrounding tissue, the bone tissue.
Because it was harder, or what
Harder,
about
too
the
strong.
metal? The
Yeah,
metal
it's-
was too strong.
Because when you think about the density or the modulus of bone versus metal, it's very different.
Yeah,
You know, metal is
for
a
sure.
lot stronger. And it's actually not a good thing, you know, when you think of load sharing, you know, really balancing your body. So with this new polymer, like for the one who can actually see the podcast, it looks a lot like bone.
Yep.
And he actually also not just doesn't look like bone, he actually feels and have very similar mechanical properties. So now you're putting something in your body, you're fusing with something or replacing part of your bone, we're working on other indication, or like the skull, with something that's pretty much like bone.
Right.
So I almost feel like, you know, we used to joke at the beginning that we don't 3D print PEKK, we actually 3D print bone.
So talk a little about what is a polymer exactly? It's like a plastic. Like what does polymer mean? And how did you guys get into sort of that materials aspect of the polymer? Where did it come from? Did you invent it? Like give us a little bit of that background.
So yeah, like a polymer is a plastic
Okay.
material. So it's a synthetic material that is being basically made in a plant.
Okay.
you know, with reactors and things like that. So it comes like really from chemical reaction.
Okay. That a company like a DuPont or something might make?
Yeah, so actually this one, nice segue. This one was actually originally invented by DuPont, I don't know, 30, 40 years ago. PEKK was invented by DuPont. And the main, actually the reason they created Peck was actually for aerospace application. So, you know, I talk a lot about medical right now because it's kind of a leading technology, but we actually use the same polymer and the same 3D printing technology outside of medical for other application, because those polymer happen to be this class of polymer, like PEKK, like Peck, also have very good mechanical performance.
Okay.
They also are very chemical resistant. So now you start thinking about area where, and now with 3D printing, you can make very cool, complex structure with nice scaffolding. So you can make a part that can have the same function as an aluminum part.
Right.
But you can make it
similar properties, lightweight, very strong and sturdy.
But now you can 3D print, you know, scaffolds, so you can compensate for some of the different properties with something that's half the weight.
Okay.
So you know,
scaffold.
A scaffold. Basically, think about a house or like a place where you have a scaffold, you know, outside of it as you're doing construction, and you have like the way you put the poles, kind of the engineering of the structure, or the columns. Know how you support something. So if you put more columns, you don't have to have a big block, but where you put the columns might give you more support.
So more columns equals more support, so you can get more strength on a smaller part?
Yes.
You know, all you can less weight?
Less weight. You know, or like more airy. Doesn't have to be a block.
Got it.
Think of traditional manufacturing. You start with a block.
Yep.
And you CNC it.
Yep.
Or mill it or whatever, machine it.
Yep.
You're very limited in how much, where and how much you remove. And it's also because it's expensive. The more you remove, the more time on the machine, the more expensive it is.
Sure, more waste and everything.
More waste, so forth. So where with 3D printing, you're actually building layer by layer. So you basically have almost total design freedom. So now you can put these really cool columns crossing each other all over the place with a lot of empty space that make it lighter.
So if I'm looking to design a part, so just to kind of like wrap this up, I'm looking to design a part. I start with the AutoCAD or Materialize Magics or whatever software I'm using, and I design a part where before I was a lot more limited to how I could machine down from something with the size of the block I can start with, and then of course there's efficiency. So if I have to take a block and I lose 80% of the material making the part, that's a huge problem, right? So that becomes challenging. Where now more design freedom, what I hear you saying, because basically I make whatever I want, and then I just build it from the ground up. So sort of the reverse. If I'm a sculptor, I have to take the block of marble and I got to remove everything to see what's left. Instead, I'm starting with nothing and building up. So a lot more opportunity for freedom. And you're saying with the right material, the right polymer, I can build a strong structure that can do something, and that's
that can
what you
be
guys
much
are doing.
lighter. And it's really kind of the difference between subtractive technology and additive technology. Right. So 3D printing is additive manufacturing.
Sure.
And when you also be layer by layer, like kind of the cool thing, you're basically doing the way nature does a lot of things. You know, you look at a tree grows layer by layer, and then also you build it for function. So a tree build, layer by layer, but through the ground in like various organic shape to get the water, or
reach for the sunlight. Sure.
Exactly. So I think additive as this kind of now the way you design and you build, you can really build for function, not just to design.
So obviously that sounds amazing, right? But there's got to be some limitations or some of the challenges. So what are some of these challenges? Well, let me take one full step backwards, right? Like, how new is this technology? How much is out there? Obviously, for an area of the country that's been manufacturing probably since manufacturing's been a thing, this is quite new. But how pervasive is this kind of polymer additive technology that you guys are working on?
So the technology is not new. Because basically, some of the buzzword like rapid prototyping, SLA, some of the other one has been like 15, 20 years, some of
Okay.
those technology. But what's really new, so there's
So, though that's not new by like IT standards, but it's very new by, we started machining things 200 years ago or whatever.
yeah, I guess,
Right.
we have a tendency to have like short-term memory
That's right,
nowadays.
that's right.
Yeah, so it's fairly new, I guess, yes.
Right.
But what's really new in the past 10 years and definitely in the past 5 years is those technologies that were first developed, or those printers for prototyping, for modeling.
Right.
Now, what we've been able to do is to take that and make it a manufacturing technology.
Right. So instead of having 3D printing kind of be relegated to the R&D department, or here's an idea or a concept, let me
let's see
show a
what it looks
customer
like.
what this could look like, how it could work. Now we're moving into no, this is going to be this is it. What maybe we can also prototype, but we're going to produce saleable parts. Only 3D printing, and I think stop me. I'm getting ahead here, but all OPM does, Oxford Performance Materials, all you do is when you manufacture, everything is printed. So anything that's sold gets printed and then shipped.
Yeah, but we still sell materials. We actually still sell bars that would be machined into some part, because you ask about limitation. There's still some parts that make sense to be machined or molded.
So you would make sort of a bar or a block of PEKK and then send that to be machined into the part instead of actually printing it up.
And that's really that would be, a customer would buy the bar and, kind of work out the process. So there's still applications where traditional manufacturing makes sense.
Right.
It's a simple design.
Yep.
It's a high volume production. Granted, we can do high volume too. So I don't think 3D printing is going to replace everything.
Right.
But when you start thinking about,
is it because, I'm sorry to interrupt,
No,
but is it because some of the machine parts, it's just cheaper to make them machined than to build them up? So if not to make those parts sound bad, but if they're not as complex, or they're kind of going to be stamped out very simple parts over and over, it's easier because it's cheaper to just get them.
So that's one of the aspects of it. The other aspect, and again, for anybody who doesn't see it, most of the printing processes, and you can see in ours, the surface is a little rough. You can feel it, right?
Yep, sure.
So most of those processes don't have the same type of tolerances and precision that you will have with kind of like CNC machining and things like that. So there's going to be some parts that are 3D printed that are going to have to be post-processed.
Right, secondary process after the printing.
If you really want to have a threaded hole for a screw and a few things.
Oh, yeah.
Or it's just your part at very high tolerances and you want something very smooth, you would have to either 3D print and post-process or just machine it. So there's still some application where it makes sense to do that.
Even limitations, if you will, for the 3D printing.
But the neat thing is on the other, so the flip side now, right?
Right, sure.
Is in the medical technology, medical world, what we found out about our technology, by the way, we call it osteofab.
Osteofab, yep.
Which is the combination of PEKK and 3D printing.
Okay.
It's our trademark. You end up with this kind of rough surface. And what we found out through both in vitro and animal studies is actually it's really good for bone on growth.
Right.
So some of the indication, not all of them, but some of the indication we're working on in the medical field, you actually try to fuse with bone. You try to attach to bone.
Right.
So we actually have a unique technology that not only will kind of we're like bone, like mechanically, but we actually bone grows onto our surface technology.
Right.
So now, we took what could be seen as a shortfall of 3D printing. Oh, it's rough. You don't have the same tolerances and so forth. We took it to actually, it has become a benefit for us. Where everybody is trying to roughen things nowadays and make it porous and all that. We don't have to do any of it. It comes like that right out of the printer.
Right out of right. So basically, what we're saying here is, I want to put something in my body. I want my body to treat it like part of my body. So I should get the bone to grow on top of it. And so as it turns out, the roughness of the thing actually helps that. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, and to be fully honest, we found it more by accident.
Right.
So once in a while,
there's been a lot of great inventions that have been found by accident.
Yeah.
So. So you, just to kind of circle back for 1 second, so you had mentioned that, PEKK was actually discovered or invented, maybe is the right way to say it, by DuPont. So how does OPM get a hold of it? Why doesn't DuPont have it? Are you owned by DuPont? People might want to know.
Yeah, no, of course. No, actually, so it was invented a long time ago, and by the time we got involved with Peck, it's actually Scott DeFelice, our CEO and founder, back in, I think, 1999, where actually the other premier I talked about, PEKK, started to be adopted and started to replace titanium in medical application. Looking for new opportunity for his company, started looking in this type of polymers, and really came across PEKK as an alternative. And that's kind of why I actually came on board first as an intern, working on the PEKK project.
That's right.
Scott still wonder how I made it from intern to president, but we'll figure it someday.
We're going to get to that
at some point. But that's kind of like always kind of like that curiosity. Okay, what's next? What is the market doing? And at that time, actually, all the patent had expired.
Okay.
The patent on the synthesis of the PEKK material, the DuPont patent, and there was PEKK available to buy on the open market. So we bought a lot of PEKK, and that's where my chemical engineering background helped. Working on the project. And we kind of started building it, from there, like looking, what are the opportunity? How different is it from PEKK and other polymers? How can we differentiate ourselves? And I think one of the main reasons we're going to 3D printing is for the first 10 years, we really tried to differentiate ourselves from other polymers. And I think we were missing one thing. And that's kind of why, the idea of 3D printing at the time where a lot of surgeons started talking, what if we could 3D print, do this and that.
Sure.
And we went to a CTO, Tony DeCarmine, and we asked him, do you think we could actually 3D print with that stuff? And he's like, after some reflection and, little research, he's like, I really think we can do it. And there was no other polymer, like biocompatible polymer, structural polymers, bone-like polymers that could be 3D printing. So we kind of went with it.
So you decided, hey, we're going to try and figure out. Yeah. So basically, discovered a polymer, and discovered's not the right word, found a polymer that was off patent that someone else had invented, and they didn't find a use for it. They just sort of had given up on it. Is that pretty much what happened? So
no, not really. I don't know the true story because I'm not them. Right. I think our take on it was at the time, when you look at that, I keep saying 20 years ago, but it's probably 30, 40 years ago now, those large chemical companies, we had really big R&D budgets.
Yep.
So they will develop a lot of new syntheses and molecules and everything.
Just playing around in the lab.
And they can't take everything to market.
Sure.
It's expensive. And then sometimes you develop something that is going to be competitive to one of your top products.
And then you don't want
so you don't want to introduce.
Release
So
it.
I think there's a little of that. The only thing, it never totally went away. Because the question is, why were there some available on the open market, right? It's because I think along the way, they still got it specified into some application and had to keep making some of it to satisfy the customers.
And so the reason that it was even being made is because it wasn't fully dead. It just, you guys thought there was more application for this particular
And that was
polymer.
aerospace. So the application was, that was a Boeing for interior aircraft.
Right.
So to go back briefly to that, one of the reasons they developed this molecule is because of some of the smoke and toxicity rating in the inside of the aircraft, changed about, 20, 30 years ago with the FAA. And this type of high performance, we call them high performance polymers, high temperature polymers, they basically, they don't burn.
So just if I followed that 100%, so they were using some other polymer inside the airplane, but it could burn or it could give up
smoke. It would burn faster at lower temperature, so then you have smoke. So,
so the FAA changed the regulations, wanted to have a less toxic smoke environment or
and
whatever.
That's my understanding because I'm really more into medical. Right. So not if I see something wrong, I'm sorry.
That's fine. You're fully absolved. I have that power. So just to kind of get a little bit more personal on this whole thing. So you're not from Connecticut originally, I would say.
Why?
Yeah. How could I tell?
I don't know.
So give us a thing how did you end up? How'd you end up in Connecticut? How'd you hook up with Scott in the beginning to kind of get involved in OPM?
So I ended up in the United States. I start with that because we're talking about mainly in America. So I ended up in America, first in Kansas.
Okay.
So actually, I graduated from engineering school in France. Part of my curriculum was the option to go abroad for 2 semesters.
Sure, of course.
I'm always curious.
Yeah.
I like to travel, and I really wanted to learn English outside of a classroom.
Okay.
So I thought
Kansas. Where else would I go?
So I didn't know that yet.
Okay, all
so
right.
I thought that coming to America would be good.
That's right.
And at the time, and still to this day, my school, my chemical engineering school in France, engineering school, had an exchange program with Kansas State University that has a big chemical engineering program.
Yep.
I'm sure everybody can understand that if you have an option to do an exchange program and you don't have to pay U.S. tuition, you don't care where you go.
That's
you
right.
just go.
That's right. That's right.
So that's how I ended up in Kansas.
Okay.
So I was there
so you went to Kansas State University for a couple semesters?
Yes.
Okay.
2 semesters, which was kind of the end of my academic, the academic portion of my.
Oh, so it was the last
school.
2 semesters of schooling that you were here.
But in order to graduate, I also had to do an internship. That was part of the requirement. We had about 4 internships throughout the entire program that were required. So I decided, I'm already in the U.S.
Might as well get an
Why
internship
not?
here. Sure.
However, at that time, I was ready to leave Kansas.
Okay.
I actually visited with my parents over spring break. Everybody goes party in Miami. I actually went to New England.
There you go.
With my parents. We did everything from, Cape Cod to Boston to New York to driving through, Connecticut. And I thought that if I had to spend a little more time in the U.S., this is an area that is a lot more close to what I'm used to from France. So I'm like, I think I would like it here. Everything is a little closer. You don't have to drive hours to do something else, to go a place. So I decided to look for internship in that area.
Okay.
And
this is like 2000?
1999. So I also had another idea.
Okay.
Where a lot of my student colleague, I don't know, you call it, or like counterpart, whatever, from my school, everybody wanted to go and work for the big, large corporation for their internship, like they wanted to go for L'Oreal and Procter and Gamble and so forth. I really wanted to get into the business side of things.
Which goes back to what we said before about not just were you passionate about the chemical and the biomedical part, but also the business side. So finding a small organization that you can make an impact was appealing.
And not just an impact, but be able to jump and do many different things. And
not get
learn
stuck sort of siloed and,
Exactly.
you're an intern in like a 10,000 person company and I gotcha. That makes sense.
So I don't know if I Google at the time. I don't know if I knew how to Google back then, but somehow I searched.
Okay. She has probably Yahoo.
Yeah, something.
Yep.
And I found
Alta Vista even?
yeah, probably. I don't even know they asked Jeeves then. But I'm dating myself. And I found a few different company, and it also had to be related to my studies. So my school would sign off on the internship. Right. So I found at the time a small business here in Connecticut called Oxford Polymers. Perfect.
Yes.
I studied polymers.
That's it.
And
it's in the name. It must work.
It must work. So at the time, Scott DeFelice was the partner in that business with his brother and his father, which is kind of where it started. In Oxford Polymers to this day is a very successful local business doing a lot of plastic processing for various industry, mainly I believe automotive. And Scott was involved in looking for new opportunity, new technology,
something different, diversify the business,
to add to the business.
Sure.
So, and I told you the story. He came, against Peck, and he has a different version of the story. He said, I keep calling, and keep saying no, but at some point anyway, he said yes. So I came as an intern working on the Peck project.
That was the beginning of the beginning.
That was the beginning, and working the polymer, working the operating, working the project, it became clear that there was tremendous opportunity, but it will require dedication.
Yep.
This is why, Scott ended up basically selling shares in Oxford Polymers to fund in 2000 Oxford Performance Materials.
Right.
And basically he was employer number 1 and I was employer number 2.
So, well, there you go.
So that's how it started. And at the time, I had no plan to either stay or leave the U.S., but I had a job offers, a very interesting projects, something new to create, to start. I'm like, I'm staying.
You're staying. And here we are, 20 years later, still
I'm even
here,
a citizen now, forget.
That's right. Look at
You
that.
know, I am made in America almost in some ways.
Very
Actually,
nice.
I was made in France. But.
Made in France, transferred to America.
Yes.
That's really exciting. What do you see kind of just, it's a really, I think, interesting technology, what you guys have done with the 3D printing. What do you see as the future of 3D printing? Do you see kind of the build-up technology expanding beyond, maybe you want to talk specific to OPM and maybe just in general, like where do you see it going? How limiting is the printer themselves? Because for those who haven't seen it, I don't know how we would really describe the 3D printer, but it looks kind of like a large oven on wheels with a window, but kind of a little more high tech with a computer attached. So, I've looked at it, and obviously when you're building, small parts like spinal implants or a piece of a head, that can go in there. But is there a limitation to the equipment? Is there a limitation to the technology that we have? Where's it going? What do you see with that?
So there's always some limitation. But, the first thing, 3D printing means so many different things. There's so many type of processes. There's so many type of printers. So I think there's a lot of opportunity because you can have the small printer in your home on your desk just to make stuff just for fun, to start making some functional stuff. But and then you have all the type of plastic and metal you can 3D print. So I think in terms of like possibilities, there's a lot of possibility because there's a lot of variation on the material side. Different type of metal, different type of plastic.
All different things you can print from.
There's also different type of process. What we use is a powder-based process. So actually, if anybody go on our website, you can see some of it. But it's like it be layer by layer on the powder base, and basically what it's called laser sintering or laser melting. So it's a laser-based process, and you basically use the laser light to melt the polymer.
Right. So basically, I'm just laying down layers, essentially like a sheet of this powder, and where I laser sinter it, basically put the laser, it starts to build it up. So then when I'm done, I'm left with powder that hasn't been sintered and stuff that's apart. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a lot like what I think of archaeology, though I've never done it.
Right.
If you look, Indiana Jones, and they're digging like in the sand and everything to find fossils.
Right.
It's pretty much the same process we're
when
doing.
When you're done, exactly.
But you also have filament-based process, and that's one of the most common. And then you have stereolithography. So you have, so I think the limitation only come from the fact that we're still learning. So which is also mean there's so many opportunities.
Sure.
So to go back to even OPM, so we only do one process. We do laser sintering or laser melting of Peck using German printer from EOS, which is a high temperature polymer printer.
And not inexpensive, I might add.
Very expensive.
That's
so
right.
this is not like your little MakerBot, or anything,
No one's putting an EOS printer in their house. Very few people.
Yeah, you've seen it, so it's huge.
Yeah.
And expensive. But for us, the type of indication or application we're going to are very highly specified. So it's either we need the right mechanical property, we need right repeatability, reproducibility. So we looked at a lot of different technology and a lot of different printers, and so far this has been the one that's been able to really get us.
Not only that, you also, don't forget, probably have sort of the FDA requirements, because these aren't things that are going to be a keychain. This is going to be inside my body. So I want to make sure that it's being made with the correct processes and the correct documentation. And
I think this is the biggest things we've actually have done. And it's both, patented to some extent. We have quite a bit of patent on process and application, but also a lot of know-how is taking a printer that pretty much anybody can buy.
Sure.
Right? It's expensive, and so it's not everybody's going to buy it.
Sure. Well, anyone who's got $1 million sitting around with nothing better to do, sure, they could get one.
And a polymer that someone else invented, but that we kind of continue to develop, and actually we're going back into some of the synthesis ourselves to add a lot more IP around our technology. But we figured out to take those two things, and that was originally more like in the prototyping world when there's no rules.
Right.
And we took that into a very highly regulated area, like the FDA, or back then in the aerospace before we sold it to Hexer. Which
we didn't really talk about, but we can get to it, sure.
so that's really, I think, our core is that we've been able to take a few pieces that were either invented or developed elsewhere and put it together and kind of bring a solution to the market,
Right.
to the surgeon, to the patient, or to some other industry that we're working on. And I think this is really, I think there's a lot more of that can happen. Because it's one thing to be able to print a prototype one time that looks okay. The dimension, you don't really care. You just want to look at it. For us, patient-specific, we absolutely have to print what has been designed. Because
Sure.
if it's slightly different, it's not going to fit.
It's not going to fit. That's right.
And then on the spine side, we work with our partner, RTI Surgical, on their new spine line. And we have, I think, 250 different sizes with them,
Right.
10,000 of parts every year. And when there's a size of the part and you need thousands of them, they better all be the same.
That's right.
So I think our strengths, and I think what a lot of those processes need to see kind of that same evolution, is how you take something that was originally developed for prototyping, one-off, and make it really repeatable.
Right.
And reproducible and to the mass market.
Do you guys, do you look at it right now and still feel like you're in the vanguard of what's happening with 3D printing? It's something, I don't know many people that are doing, actually I should say, I don't think I know anyone that's doing exactly what you guys are doing. Are there other companies out there, in Connecticut, in the country, globally, that are doing the same level of 3D printing for production that OPM is doing? Yeah, I'm just interested. You're kind of, I don't know if but where is that going? And do you envision that 10, 15, 20, 30 years from now, more and more of production will be done this way?
Yeah, it keeps growing. It keeps growing for us.
Sure.
I think we only scratch the surface, no doubt about it.
Scratch the surface in biomedical, scratch the surface in general, both?
In general.
Okay.
And I think there's a lot more knowledge around metal additive.
Just because we're more used to metal, or
I think so. I'm not quite sure what the answer is, but yes. I think a lot because it's been driven by more like aerospace and automotive and things like that. But I think there's been a lot more work put into metal additive. And we don't do any of that.
Yes,
All we
no,
do is, polymer and only PEKK, actually additive. I know that as a matter of fact, right now, we are the only company, unless I didn't check in a couple of weeks, but that has actually, let's say, FDA clearance for 3D printed polymer implants.
Okay.
So there's other polymer that's 3D printed for medical application, like guides, surgical guide to
Sure.
cut, but actually in terms of
But in
implant.
terms of implants, something that's going to stay
Yeah,
in. OPM's the only one that's FDA
As far
approved
as I
to do
know,
a polymer implant.
It's misleading sometimes because some people say they use 3D printing, but they will use 3D printing to 3D print a mold or a cast. So there's all to model it before they actually make the
Which isn't really,
implant.
but the actual piece that goes in.
The manufacturing process being 3D printing with a polymer to make a permanent implant.
Right.
As far as I know, we're still the only one.
And I know, I don't want to get into it because I know you're more on the biomedical side, but I know OPM had at one time built up an aerospace business that was doing a lot of aerospace parts and printing there, which has since been sold to another Connecticut company based in Stanford, Hexcel. And so that's to some degree, right, a big success of saying, hey, here's another application. We grew that and sort of, sold that off and now, focusing on the biomedical. What do you see, just kind of back to another personal question, what kind of drives you to be successful? What do you think has driven you to go from where you guys were, a 2-person team that started looking at a polymer and saying, what can we do with it, to, here we are, 20 years later, 19 years later, with having built and sold an aerospace company, building and constantly growing a biomedical business that's doing really unique and interesting things, the only FDA approved, implant polymer processing company in the country. Some really exciting stuff. That took a long-term view that you had to invest in and take a chance to live across the ocean from your family. What's inside you that made that happen?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
But I think, first, a curiosity. I'm curious. I'm curious. So, one of the things I just, left friend, and I'm in Kansas, and at the time I had no idea where Kansas was, but I think I was curious. And I like to experience new things, So I think that's part of it. I'm also patient. with certain things when it matters, when patients matter. But I like to also create and build and learn. So I think, but I would say the first one was probably curiosity.
Just driving you, that curiosity, what could be done.
What can be done,
and you're going to need
next?
patience to put in 10 years before, because I mean, you started, I don't even know when the first kind of product went live, but it was a while.
Yeah, it was, we started early on with selling materials like, those rods or bars we talked about for more traditional manufacturing. We started that within, probably within the first 4 years. It's more traditional. But, I think really, think about it, 1999, worked on the project, and we bought our first printer in 2011. So right there.
Right, 12 years before you got that first printer.
But I think, if you, whether you're an entrepreneur, a curious person, if you keep wanting to look at the next thing, you keep wanting to do something else instead of what everybody else is doing. I think I always wanted something different.
Yeah.
I've always been different.
Right.
So I think that just came naturally in some ways.
Sure.
And I also love to work.
Well, that doesn't hurt either. Yeah. If you're going to be an entrepreneur, start early, you better love to work, and you better love what you do if you're going to be successful.
And then the more I was doing and the more I was discovering, the more excited, I got. And then when you start to take form, and accidentally you actually realize that the things you work on, the thing you're making are making a difference. It's like, I can get rich, but I can also do good at the same time. It's pretty cool.
Right, yeah, a combination of all the good stuff you want to do.
Not
right,
that I'm
good
rich,
business,
but,
do well.
I'm trying to.
Yeah, that's right.
But
you're not living in the poorhouse either. So, so talk a little bit about, Connecticut, and how do you think Connecticut's been, supportive of what you guys are doing? Do you view where you've been in Connecticut and where you guys have stayed in South Windsor and growing there as an advantage? Like, can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, no, I think I'm a big advocate for Connecticut. As you mentioned earlier in the podcast, you and I are on the board of the Connecticut Technology Council, and actually became the chair about a couple of years ago, I think. And it's been exciting for me to actually be in Connecticut. I think it's the best kept secret, and I think people from Connecticut start with the negative a lot of times because somehow they don't want people to know how good it is.
That's right.
This is one of my pet peeves, as you know.
Yes.
You and I, but that
you
discussion
and I,
more,
we
more
both
than
have
one.
that same pet peeve of like, why do we have to start with the negative when there's so much positive, which is what we're talking about.
Exactly,
today.
and like for us, so when we started in 2000, one of the first investment we got was from Connecticut Innovation.
That's right. CI.
CI, and they
speaking of like kind of best kept secrets, although I think kind of the circles we travel in now, a lot of people have been through CI. But for those that don't know, Connecticut Innovations is essentially a publicly funded private equity firm. Well, it's a weird kind of juxtaposition, a public private equity firm, but basically an investment arm of the state of Connecticut who's got kind of a mission to go out there and make the risky bets that exist in companies. But those are the bets where, many of them don't pay off, but the ones that pay off tend to pay off big. And, for those who have looked into it, CI has been a net huge positive for Connecticut, not only in the fact that it's helped companies like OPM and many others get some startup funding to be able to get these things off the ground, but CI has a track record of making money long term. So they've made great investments. Those investments have paid off, and I think that's a great thing Connecticut's done to help build the ecosystem.
So it's starting, but they do it smart too because they lend you money, or there's various things, but they make you stay in Connecticut.
That's right.
And so that was one side. So early on we were getting funding and an assistance from Connecticut.
Sure, DCD,
as well. Yeah, along the way we also got it. When we're expanding the aerospace before selling it to Hexel, actually DCD was really instrumental in getting us the funds to actually grow our aerospace business. Ultimately got sold to another Connecticut company,
business.
so it cannot stay. So that was pretty cool success story as well. And then when you think about what we do, yes, it is manufacturing. And I think one of the things that is exciting about Connecticut is the history manufacturing. You mentioned it. But we're also moving to this advanced manufacturing.
That's right.
3D printing is advanced manufacturing. And also other company like, OK Industry, like, Jason was on the podcast not long ago. They do really, it's more traditional manufacturing. But the things they do, the precision, that's, you ask about something that will never be 3D printing, what they do, for the medical customer will never be 3D printed.
Right, the big stamping that OK Industries does for their medical
or like
devices.
their precision machining, some of the part they do, like the level, the size, the small size of those parts with the level of details is amazing.
Yep.
So there's a lot of history of manufacturing, and over the years, especially the last, I think, 30 years, Connecticut got really big into advanced manufacturing.
That's right.
Which is also why for us 3D printing is kind of a nice fit. And it's also because you can find the right talent. I know that this all discussion about talent and we want more
Workforce
talent.
development, sure, which we're going to talk about right next. So good transition.
But for us, though we're manufacturing, we have mainly engineers.
Right.
It's a really high-tech, highly specified, type of environment we manufacture for and manufacture in.
Yep.
So I think Connecticut has also given us the talent that we needed to grow, the pool of talent, without paying a premium like New York and Boston.
Sure.
But also, is it more expensive than some of the, states in the South and Midwest? Yeah, but that does not make sense. That will not save us money because the talent is here, our customers are close by, and the quality of life.
Right.
If the people we hire, the people are with, the people I'm friend with, do enjoy the quality of life that you have in Connecticut.
Yeah.
I don't have a family, but if you have a family, I have one. I have a husband and a dog, but but if you have kids, there's really good school.
Quality of life in Connecticut's really second to none, I think, to your point, and having that education. So let's talk a little about workforce development, because I think, my belief is that in the economy that we're in the 21st century and beyond, the battle's not going to be about where can I shave off a couple percentage points in taxes, but it's really going to be all about where can I find the people that I need to grow the business and give me the talent and the engineering and the capabilities to run the machine. So, what does OPM do to try and attract and retain that great talent?
So one thing that's been easy for us is that 3D printing is buzzing.
Yep.
Additive manufacturing is buzzing.
That's right.
So we've been very successful in having people come to us to want to work for us.
Right.
So I think that's
sort of like the internet age type thing.
Yes,
right? It's like, wow,
yes.
I don't know what the internet is, but I'd like to be a part of it.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's sort of the same
so
thing.
So for us, we've been a little lucky in that way.
Right.
But retention is also attracting, especially because we're a small business. So we try to be competitive, with larger corporations, but we can't. Especially right now when you look at some of the number of hires that some of the large, like the
like
UTC,
Whitney, right, or
so
Electric
forth,
Boat, sure.
we would never compete with them. And it's why? Because the people who work for us and we're going to enjoy environment in a small company with 45 people, right?
Right.
It's going to be very different environment. So I think we're more competing in terms of culture. So I think on one end, we have really cool technology that attract the right people.
Yep.
But I think we've been working really hard on culture because I want people to not, leave to work or work for,
right.
You spend so much time at work
right.
that if you can enjoy not only what you do, but the people
you're doing with,
the culture around it.
Yep.
So I think for us, has been really focusing on the culture, making sure there's a good match. I always say that you can have the best skill set, the best resume, but if you don't feel in the culture, don't work well with others, it doesn't matter.
Right. Yeah.
And vice versa, you may not have all the skill set or the experience yet, but you work well with others, you learn easily from others, then you're going to blossom in our environment. So
that's a lot we've been hearing about, like kind of the smaller businesses, especially, Connecticut on the manufacturing side. Certainly there's some challenges, right? Because when the big boys are hiring a lot, they often can offer some compensation packages and some money that small businesses can't afford. Yep. So we have to be able to offer something that they can't offer, right? So I think that's great. And that technology place is super interesting.
And think about it. It's like one other thing I wanted when I started and I decided to work for a small business is because I don't want to be put in a corner and doing the same thing or working on one project. I wanted to touch a different thing, being involved in all aspects of a business.
Sure.
A lot of the people we have at our company like that as well.
Yes.
They're exposed to various things. And
getting a little bit of diversity in your job, so you're not just coming in every day a cog in the giant machine. You kind of can have something to work with. How have you mentioned something earlier which I think was interesting, which I'm going to play on a little bit. You brought up kind of OK Industries unprompted. Yeah. And I'm just curious kind of your perspective on how collaborative is the manufacturing environment here in Connecticut versus competitive, right? Do you find that other leaders in manufacturing are open to talking to you, that are looking to help each other succeed? Is it more competitive than cooperative? What do you see there?
I think it's very cooperative. And I think especially, through the Connecticut Technology Council, this is actually what we're trying to do. We're trying to look at technology and technology company in Connecticut and, kind of network them, get them to work together, because a lot of us have had the same problem or we don't know yet until we get together, and someone may have it earlier. And I think there is a community in Connecticut that wants to have Connecticut companies successful.
Yep.
So, I actually find it very cooperative once you figure out how to reach
How to get to each other.
To each other.
Sometimes it is amazing how in such a small state it feels like it's hard to find each other.
Yeah, and it was small set, but we still have like different hubs. So I think part of what we do, at CTC is to try to change that.
Right.
But it's hard because, you have a hub in Stanford, which is, very close to New York. Then you have New Haven, and with Yale and some of the incubator, and then you have Hartford, and let's not forget New London, so you have a lot of different hubs.
And a little shout out to Danbury a little bit too,
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yep.
So it is, and it can be hard to bring all that together. I think that's great. So, I mean, you found, just quickly talk about CTC for a little bit, the Connecticut Technology Council. So I know the goal of CTC is really to develop that community and help, technology companies in Connecticut, which I think it's a great point that you make here. And look, as the chair of the board of the CTC, I think that speaks volumes to say, hey, the technology in Connecticut and really in general isn't just what people think of, like, just to go back to, we talked about Yahoo, Google. It isn't just that, right? It's also in manufacturing. And so I think that Industry 4.0, the robotics, the technology, the industrial IoT, those things that are coming up, 3D printing, are all advanced technologies.
IT, like you,
Yep. No, that's true. They'll all need to work together, and I think it's been a great thing. So, I mean, give maybe kind of your quick feedback on CTC and the value that brings to Connecticut, and maybe to you specifically.
Yeah, for me specifically is like it's a way for me to give back to the technology community. One other thing I love to do, we do various programs. So we do like a lot of networking because we try to connect those, those technology companies with service provider because as member we have, a startup to large organization. So we've got all sizes and all different needs, but we kind of feed it to each other. So I think that's kind of exciting, and we learn from each other, and we also connect with service providers. So if you start something, you can connect to the business community that you need to support the growth of your business. So I think that's an important role.
Connecting different companies and showing people where to go.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
where to go, how to make things, So that's kind of one area. The other one is kind of education, and recognition of technology leaders. Every year we have the Women of Innovation event, which is here in March. And that's actually how I got introduced with CTC. And I think it's kind of amazing to also showcase some of the success stories. This happened to be mainly women, though we started to give award to men last year. But, I think, part of us also highlighting the successes, and what people do, and also giving opportunity for mentorship is, I think, very important. So for me, I wouldn't be where I am as a business leader if it wasn't for my STEM background. As an engineer. So one of the mission I have for myself is to really get more involved in STEM, and early on in the life of young people, to really kind of like teach everybody what technology can do. And STEM, or STEAM actually, because I think art is a big piece.
Is part of it.
And for us, when you look at some of the parts we made, I think there's a bit
of art into the science.
Into it. So I think, CTC can give me this opportunity to connect with other business leaders, learn from them. Obviously learn from me, kind of this mentorship, sharing both ways.
I just want to pull on the Women of Innovation since you brought it up. So, I think it's been interesting, and we've had some women on the podcast, and we'll have more. I'm just curious to maybe talk about, your experience as kind of a woman leader in, sort of the STEM fields in science and in manufacturing, and just your experience, and has it been welcoming? Have you seen challenges? Just talk about it.
Yeah, well, I'd be lying if you say it wasn't challenging.
Okay.
No, that is challenging. I feel in many ways I had to work a lot harder.
You do.
Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's just a feeling I had. However, I do believe that my STEM background, my engineering background, made me who I am.
Sure.
Or really got me where it opened the door for me. It really kind of helped differentiate myself from others. So I think that's kind of why I encourage, young girls that are good in math and science, especially not young people in general, but young girls to not be afraid of it.
Sure.
But it starts early on.
Yeah.
So for me that was key. I just happened to have a math teacher when I was in high school that told me to get into engineering. I think she always regretted it.
Were you she regretted. Were you always into math? Like what made her
I was just really good at it.
Oh, well, that's good.
It's just, and I didn't know what to do. So she's like, just go to engineering. You're going to know. It's like you can do anything with it.
Yeah.
You will open the door. I'm like, okay, fine. I was 17. I don't know. But the neat thing from that standpoint is I look at what I learned through my engineering studies. I think the bigger thing I learned is problem solving.
Yeah.
And everything we do is problem solving.
Everything in life.
Mm-hmm. So solution driven,
focusing on outcomes, overcoming obstacles,
so
coming up, testing.
So maybe that's
things.
the other thing: curiosity and that.
Yeah, curiosity and not giving up. So just a couple quick little questions I just generally like to ask. So listen, there's limited pool of money that OPM has or any organization has, and there's all different types of things to invest in, right? There's printer technology, there's more personnel, there's sales, there's marketing, there's IT, ERP systems, blah blah blah. When you guys are looking at when you're trying to make investments, what's some of the thought process that you go through, Severine, to think about where do we want to invest today?
Well, I think first we have to see what are the value we'll be providing, to our customer,
Sure.
And what type of value added is going to differentiate from a competition. It's value based, right?
Value based, yeah.
Because it's if you cannot create value, and not just create monetary value, but just value in terms of, it's a better fit for the implant.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, now, spine, we can have like bone on growth. Now we're bringing value with the technology that will ultimately translate in dollars. Then we also look at barrier to entries. Not just is there barrier to entry, but can we create them for competition? So
give yourself an advantage by creating a barrier.
Exactly. So over the years, we've been working on patents. Basically, today, if someone buys the same printer that we have, and somehow buy Peck on the open market, they won't be able to make, a patient-specific 3D printed Peck implant without infringing on a patent.
Got it.
So we create. Also, they may be able to make something, but part of why we can be competitive also from a cost standpoint is. I explained we build it layer by layer with powder.
Right.
So on a good day, if you have we may use 10% of the powder to consolidate the implant.
Yep.
So the 90% of the material, we can reuse it over and over again.
Right.
But we have a patent on that. So
on the reuse of the material.
Yeah. So if someone wants to do the same thing, they will need to come to with their license or things to be able to do efficiently.
Right.
So I think.
So a lot of value creation kind of in research and development and creating intellectual property that's going to protect the business.
And the other thing we do, we try to look at what are we good at. We're good at technology, right? We're a technology company, we're a materials company, and we'll try to use established distribution channel, to bring our technology to market. And let's not reinvent and recreate what already exists.
Right.
So, for example, on the cranial and facial implant that we distribute through OPM Biomedical, one of the largest orthopedic company. So now we can really benefit from their, their knowledge,
leverage their largesse, their ability to sell,
without having to recreate. On the spine side, we work with RTI Surgical. Same thing, establish, spine company.
So you're not having to build your own sales force.
Exactly.
You're going to focus on, so to kind of go back to the investment decision, it really looks like what is OPM great at? What do we want to be, leverage our value? And it sounds like the value add is in research and development, and then of course in actual manufacturing of these like various implant technologies and stuff, but not necessarily getting into building like a huge sales team. So partnering where that makes sense. Yeah. That's pretty exciting. Talk a little bit, I know you guys opened up a location in Japan not too long ago. It was a ribbon cutting a couple of months back.
Like in July.
So, why Japan? You're not a huge company. Why the decision to go to Japan? What do you see as the advantages there? Did you have to learn Japanese? Give us some of that background.
So it's pretty exciting because we did open a subsidiary there, in Japan, in Tokyo.
Yep.
We have the grand opening in July. So I think part of it, Japan was always a big dream of Scott to get into Japan.
Okay.
But I think beside that, I believe that our technology is as a great fit for the Japanese market.
Okay.
Especially in medical. There's not a lot of so one of the competitive technology for some of the things we do is actually allograft, which means like cadaver bone or that basically
like take a piece of my bone from one part and put it somewhere else.
That would be like autograft yours or like allograft from someone else, and usually it would be like, cadaver, harvested bone from a cadaver or other thing. And that's
I'm just going to say that's a little freaky.
Yeah.
Someone's going to put a dead guy's spine in my body. But all right, I got it. Go ahead. Keep going. Yeah, it's all right. I'm an IT guy. That's why. It freaks me out. Keep going. Go ahead.
So I think, culturally, that's something in Japan you don't see. So I think you don't see a lot of other polymer type of, implants over there. So we thought there was a huge, opportunity for technology in Japan.
Because they don't want to use cadaver parts, so here's an opportunity. If they're not going to take that, that eliminates huge part of what's out there. So our technology fits in nicely with what they already don't want to do culturally.
Yes. So that's at least, my side of it. I think that as a real opportunity there. However, we tried for 20 years to do that as an American company. It doesn't work.
It doesn't work.
So, so we actually partner with a Japanese company, actually a large multi-billion-dollar company who came as an investor into a subsidiary in Japan called JSR, who had, we've been starting to get more into life sciences.
Right.
So, they have this roadmap to get more into life sciences. They're originally a rubber company, and they, they're multi-billion.
Like tires, Goodyear, rubber.
Something like that.
Got it.
but they got more and more into life sciences, and they really kind of look at our technology and thought there was a huge opportunity to partner together and bring it to Japan. So for us, it was important to kind of become Japanese to really get into the Japanese market, and it's a large market. It's a small island, but it's a large market.
Sure. Well, third biggest economy in the world.
Exactly.
Yep.
So I think there's a real opportunity. For us, aging population, it's
opportunity to do some more stuff. Sure,
an opportunity to do something better, for them as well. So I think we're very excited about it. So
that's awesome. Well, listen, I think it's going to be time to kind of start to wrap it up. So we're going to go to our rapid fire round questions. So
oh dear.
So this is called hot take questions, and some of these are like pretty American. So we'll see how Americanized you become. Red Sox or Yankees?
Red Sox.
Yes. Starbucks or Dunkin' Donuts?
Starbucks.
Staycation or exotic destination?
I like it both.
You like both? Vacation in general.
Vacation.
But exotic if you have to choose?
Yes.
iPhone or Android?
iPhone.
Sports car or SUV?
Both.
Hard to decide. She wants everything, folks. If you could do anything other than what you're doing today, Severine, what would it be?
I'd be a fashion designer.
For those of you that can't see her, she's always very, very sharply dressed. Can we get her shoes on the thing? What's your favorite business book?
Oh, my goodness. That's a tough one. Can I play the fifth?
Sure, we can skip it. You can always get back to me later. What's one thing you learned early in your career or early in your life that you think helped propel you to the success that you've had?
Never give up, never take anything for granted.
What's something that you learned later in your career or later in your life that you wish you could go back and tell young Severine to help her succeed a little bit more?
When you think this is the way it's supposed to be, or when you, how do I say it correctly? There's nobody but you knows how it should be. Don't listen to other to make your own decision.
Don't let them make the decision for you.
Yeah.
I love that. That's a great place to leave it. So before I ask you the final question, I wanted to get to this. We always like to ask people, hey, who's your white whale customer? If there's someone out there that you wish would look at OPM and you get more business or get some business, is there a customer out there like that you think about all the time? Hey, these guys should buy from us, or?
There's no one customer, but I really wished that more orthopedic companies really look at what we do closely. I think a lot of time because they could really benefit because they can address I think we have something that is better for the patient, right?
Yep.
So I want to find channels to bring it to that patient. For that I have to go through the surgeon, but the surgeon in the hospital buy from the large for orthopedic company. And I just feel like a lot of time for us, the hardest part, we have to do it ourselves first and create the demand, and only then the market will come. So I think maybe I would encourage some of the leader in all the medical device community to really look at what we do and not be afraid of the timing of what we do, if that makes sense. So,
get out there, you have more. There still sounds like a lot of distance between you and the ultimate consumer, the
Yes.
patient, right? So there's the surgeon, then there's like the surgical leadership at the hospital, then there's
Yes.
the medical device companies that sell into the hospital, and that whole chain needs to get there. So sounds like what you're saying is, man, you really wish that the people that make the decisions would look at this technology and go, something. There's something here that's really better for the patient.
But do I get there? There's so many red tape, and I'm very, it's been great that Zygmont Biomed at the time, Biomed before the acquisition was the first one to bet on our technology by in 2012. We didn't even have approval from the FDA. They went with it, and I think some of the other orthopedic company could look at that, take a risk. Because the reward when you have something unique, could be greater. So I think, and there's, right now we've got CMF, we've got spine. We actually just got a new clearance for suture anchor for sports medicine, rotator cuff surgery.
Mm-hmm.
That's exciting. So I think, we could bring with the right partner. That could be really kind of the next big thing for us. But I like to see our technology. I like to say that our technology. I would say anywhere where we interface with bone, we have an opportunity to print something. Right. Not just something unique, but just something better. Mm-hmm. So I would just encourage, whether they're the Stryker of the world, the Johnson, you can list all the big one or the mid-sized one who want to differentiate yourself. Really take a close look. Don't be afraid because, it's similar to, or you think it's similar to what you have, or someone has spent 20 years of their life building a product line, and now they see something that will be competitive. Well, what if you're the one who actually bring that in and say, yeah, it could compete with us, but now we could work together.
Right. Don't be afraid of the new stuff because it could actually be better. Well, that's a really good thing to say as well. So at the very end, here's what I wanted to just ask you. Oh, before I get to that, people want to reach out to you, get more information about OPM or talk to you. What's the best way to find you?
I think our website, www.oxfordpm.com. So it's OXFORD, P as in Paul, M as in Mary.
.com. There we go, oxfordpm.com. Sounds great. So listen, we talked about a lot of different stuff today. And one thing I like to do at the end is sort of ask you to leave the listeners or a viewer and say, hey, one of the things you feel like was a great takeaway that you wish someone would walk away from here is we're trying to build this community and give people something to learn. What's kind of a big takeaway from today you think someone should walk away with?
I think, I tell a lot of people two things. First, take a deep breath. Really, it's never that bad. But the biggest takeaway, the biggest thing for me, you can own your successes if you don't own your mistakes. And that's one thing I'm really push with everybody I work with. It's like if you come to me with a problem or an issue, something that went wrong, and you point the finger at someone else, and you don't even attempt to have a solution to this, but you make excuses, then the next time if you're right and you have a success, you don't own it. You didn't own your mistake. So that's I think I've learned more by making mistakes. I hope not making too many of them.
Right.
So you learn from them, and then you become better, and then you have successes. But you have to own those mistakes. Just because you should own it, period. It's not. But also because you learn from them, there's nothing wrong. If you make the same one again and again, there's another issue.
Right.
So the major things like own your mistakes, own your successes, be a mentor, give back. Also, mentor people. Like you go much higher by lifting people along with you versus stepping on them. So I think be a mentor, teach others. When you're a manager, delegate, but delegate in a way that you teach the person to do the job you do, so you can move on something else.
That's right.
So I think I see some of the young managers sometimes afraid to teach other or to give some of the work. Say, well, what's going to happen? They're going to get rid. And that's the contrary. If you're a good mentor, a good teacher, a good manager, and you're creating time to learn something else, that's value.
That's right.
And along the way, you made someone else successful.
Yeah.
So that would be
That's great. No, those are great takeaways. I think for me, the thing that we talked about, which I think is so important, and I think everyone needs to remember this, is be curious. That framework of curiosity is just so important as we try and continue to build this Connecticut community of manufacturing and the businesses that they support, and continue to grow and lift all these boats. I think a huge thing is to be curious. Be curious about what we could do better on our own companies. Be curious about what other people are doing and how we can help each other. But that curiosity, I think, to me, is an awesome takeaway, and it's been a big part of your success, and I think it can be a big part of everybody else's success as well.
I think if you're not curious, you're gonna be very limiting when you learn.
Absolutely. And we need to learn as much as we can. Severine, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Ari.
I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
As always, thanks so much for tuning in. I definitely want your feedback and hope you subscribe. But what I want the most is to build a community where we learn and grow with each other. I hope you're getting a lot of value out of the time we're spending together. Thanks so much for listening. I'll see you next time.